There. All right, here we go. So I'm super excited about this. Katie and I have been doing, if you've heard about any of our Zoom trainings, we have been doing 16 trainings for teachers on how to use Zoom effectively with high leverage instructional strategies. And so this one is a one-time training, a one-time session that we're doing. And I'm super excited because I finally get to talk about other things other than Zoom. So really, really glad to have you here. I am Carrie Lupoli. I am coming at you from outside of New Haven, Connecticut. I'm founder of Classroom U, which is an organization focused on impacting educators to be empowered to find ways to ensure that all students are receiving the education that they deserve. So as a former administrator and national consultant, I have been actually leading a virtual team myself through my own online coaching business for a couple of years. And I'm thrilled to be able to offer all of us a chance for us leaders to kind of come together to support each other in this new leadership role that you guys have all found yourselves in. So I'm joined here tonight with my former colleague, a very good friend, and he's a school leader, William Sprankles. He is also one of those now leading one of those now virtual staffs like you are. He is the executive director of innovative teaching and learning at Butler Tech in Cincinnati, Ohio, given his current position and truly an innovative mindset. I was so excited to talk to him about coming on to work with me on this session because there is no one better to help us lead tonight than William. In addition, you've also already heard, those of you that have been on for a few minutes, from Katie MacArthur. She's another former colleague of ours who is also an educator, and she's agreed to moderate our meeting, as well as help facilitate your questions in the chat and all of that. We're recording, so we will make sure we send this to you. We'd love for you to keep your video on because, 70% of communication comes from body language. So if you can put your video on, we'd love to see you and have you be a part of this discussion. So we'll keep moving. Let's just do over a couple of housekeeping things. Stay muted if you can. The background noise is kind of a real issue, but you can, when you want to talk or anything, we'll just make sure you unmute. And keep your video if you can. Put questions or comments in the chat. We'll use that a lot for communicating. And let's talk a little bit about what our goal is here. So just like a good educator, we're going to have a goal. But as a result of our session tonight, leaders, there's more than just principals here. We have leaders in all sorts of positions. We'll be able to just reflect on and establish practices to effectively lead your staff virtually. Okay? I see my mom over there looking at with my dad, who is also a school administrator. I come from a family of administrators. I love it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about our agenda. We're going to talk about 4 things. We're going to talk about extending professional trust and why that's important. We're going to talk about empathy and humility. We're going to talk about how to think creatively about this kind of thing that we're in, and then how to build staff community. So before we really dig in, I want to set the stage for us. So let's just, for a moment, I don't know if you've had a chance to do this with all the craziness that's been going on, but let's take a step back and think about what we've all just been through. So just over 3 weeks ago, every aspect of life as we knew it changed within 24 to 48 hours. And so let's be clear, the virus is the catalyst, but really the cause of the stress is about the amount of adaptation that has had to occur on such a large scale in such a short amount of time. So it's not just the scale and the scope, but it's also the speed. Because in most life-altering situations, we've had either time to get ready for it, like maybe a child going off to college or a big move, and it doesn't typically impact every single aspect of our lives. Or if we've had like the death of a family member that was unexpected, it still doesn't usually touch every single piece of us. So the amount of adaptation that all of us are going through can't be diminished. And it's occurring to all of us, you, me, your family, your teachers, your students, their families, our leaders, everyone. There's just a lot to think about, a lot to recalibrate. So as a result, all of us, and if you think about this, I know you'll recognize this because when I really thought about this, it really hit home for me. We are all going through decision-making fatigue. We are finding ourselves having to make decisions about things we've never had to think about before. And it's in every single part of our lives, from grocery shopping to leadership, parenting, and literally everything in between. So in addition to that, we are also suddenly faced with having to face obstacles and barriers that we can't control, like students having even more lack of access to education or inequity, opportunity. And as a result, because of all this, little tiny stressors that may not have bothered us before could be triggers to some very emotional responses. So we have to be really cognizant of this and be even more intentional around the concepts that I just started talking about. Building trust with our staff, showing empathy and demonstrating humility, being creative and thinking outside of the box, and building community with our staff, because we can't be one of those stress triggers for them, okay? So I'm going to hand off to William now, and he's going to start to dig into each of these 4 areas. And Carrie and William fashion, I will most likely interrupt him at different times because that's what I do best. But we will kind of work to kind of process these 4 areas, why they're so important to focus on, and how we can start to lead effectively through these 4 lenses. Sound good? You guys give me a thumbs up if you're cool with that. All right, good, good, good. All right, William Sprankles, let's go. Let's start talking about trust, shall we?
Yeah. So out of the gates, this is not like a new concept that we as educators choose to talk about, choose to learn about. From day one, all of us have been wrestling and grappling with this concept in regards to how we create that type of a culture where trust is present when we are a leader, right? Here's what I think is more critical around this concept of extending trust in a virtual space is you have to automatically extend it to everyone on your staff from the jump. That's super important. Like teachers right now, there's a couple of ways to think about this. So what extending trust is it's the golden rule. How we go about doing that is really critical when we're trying to manage a virtual staff. The first thing is, if you are a control freak, there's some of us on this call that are type A, there's some of us that are type B on this call, right? Some of us are left brain, some of us are right brain. Principals come in all types of brains. Some of you want to control every single thing about your staff, and it will backfire right now. It might feel good for a couple of days, but if you are creating a culture where you are trying to micromanage your staff, it is going to backfire on you at some point. So that's super important, right? Like this golden rule out of the gate around extending trust means we have to automatically extend professional trust to all of our teachers. And we have to give grace is step 1. And the opposite of giving grace is do not micromanage your teachers right now. A lot of our teachers have their own challenges in their own households with their own children, and they're the breadwinners in their family right now. A lot of them have already lost jobs. Some of them are supporting their parents, grandparents, cousins, you name it. My mom lost her job this week. My brother lost his job this week, right? So there's a lot of educators that are carrying the load, and what we can't do as principals is try to micromanage our educators. It will absolutely backfire on us. The second thing we have to do to extend trust is we have to accept the fact that every teacher's classroom is going to look radically different in a virtual space. Teachers come with a variety of different technology levels. They come with a variety of capacities of how long they can be in front of the screen, right? If you were running a building and you had your classrooms normed, that's going to feel completely different when you get into a virtual space, and you have to be okay with that. It's part of extending professional trust to your teachers. So again, out of the gates, the first thing you want to do is give grace, and the opposite of that is don't micromanage. Then you want to definitely accept the fact that every single teacher's classroom is going to look significantly different. And thirdly, how you're going to go about leading your staff by extending trust, you have to look for those teachers that can be leaders in this time, like right now in your staff. Your traditional department chairs might not be leaders right now in your buildings. Your traditional building leaders might not be building leaders. It doesn't mean we don't continue to work with them, but there might be some other teachers that have the right approach to this work, the right mindset to this work. And by engaging in some shared leadership right now in a virtual space and deploying shared leadership, you're really going to start extending trust virtually to your teachers.
William, I'd love to just jump on that for a second, because Katie and I have just trained over 3,000 teachers, and it wasn't just about Zoom. I wanted to drop some mindset things in there because that's what we do. And one of the things that was really important to me for them to understand is not only, yes, like we've all been handed a bunch of lemons. We need to assume the best in each other. And I have said outright, your leaders don't know what they're doing either. They've never done this before. So understand that you have an opportunity to help solve problems, and giving them that opportunity to have that voice is going to allow them to feel heard. But so many times when I coach principals and teachers, there's this kind of wall sometimes between administrators and teachers. And this is a chance for us to break that wall. And by giving them some of that trust, I think it's an opportunity to do that.
And another way to look at this is during my years as a principal, I went through some chapters where I had lost and in fact destroyed trust with my teachers. Like I screwed up a dozen times making administrative moves that backfired on me, right? We all know how long it takes to recover from trust. If any of you on this call are transitioning from traditional leadership into your virtual leadership chapter right now, you might be transitioning where you were struggling to have the trust of your teachers. Now's an opportune time to rebuild trust with your teachers. And it's perfectly normal as an administrator to accept the fact we're not perfect at building trust. Like this is the messiest work that we can do, is leading other adults, and developing a culture of trust is a crazy critical process to go about that work. So for all of us, there's an opportunity, even if it's one teacher on your staff, there's one teacher that you have an opportunity with to rebuild with right now, to reapproach that relationship, to extend that olive branch and rebuild that trust. Whether it's your whole staff, part of your staff, there's an opportunity for that growth mindset. Tara, I see that comment popping up in the chat room. That's what this is about, right? So don't micromanage your teachers. Accept the fact that every classroom is going to look differently. Find teachers that you can delegate to and let them be shared leaders. And you have to have a growth mindset that we as administrators are constantly working on trust. That there's never a place of arriving at it, right? Every teacher's world has just been rocked. So their trust foundation is on shaky ground right now with everybody and everything. And if your district is forcing you to do virtual observations, virtual check-ins, virtual micromanagement of teachers, it's gonna make your journey even more difficult. So the last and final thing is, don't be afraid to name for your teachers that you are working on trust as a norm. You have to intentionally name it, intentionally state it at the beginning of your check-ins, your meetings, your one-on-ones on a constant basis. Appreciate the chats in the chat bar.
William, I
Tara,
want to add a piece to that too, because I think I don't want people to be afraid to necessarily say, if teachers are in a Zoom class and, you know, a principal, you have to wonder you have to think about what your relationship has been in terms of going into classrooms. But if you are able to, or if you want to, or if you're planning to go into classrooms, it's an opportunity there to support and to show kind of that caring and love to the teacher, who may not do everything correctly, but it's not a time to necessarily coach them unless they really want it and ask for it. But it doesn't mean you can't go in and offer support if that's something that they want.
Let's transition. So we're going to shift out of extending trust. That was our first concept. We're going to move into empathy and humility. Two super powerful concepts that need to have like a very intimate relationship with each other all the time. This isn't just about leading a virtual staff, but these concepts are magnified right now more because we're in this virtual space. We have to lean on these two particular concepts, right? So the first thing is, you're trying to create a culture where you not only model having empathy for your teachers, but you're modeling it in a way that your teachers are willing to have empathy for your students. And the way that you can have to start down that path is by demonstrating that you are humble enough, or modeling humility, to let your teachers in and see you be vulnerable so that they can engage with you in a way that creates a culture of empathy. Humility creates a culture of empathy. Like there's a relationship in that equation there. So the first thing to think about in this space is don't be afraid to tell your teachers that these are uncharted waters for you, that you don't have all the answers, that you don't know what the right decisions are, but you're willing to walk down this journey hand in hand with them. That's what empathy and humility is about as a paired concept right now. Why that's critical is because you're not going to be able to effectively lead your staff, and most importantly, it will not transfer down to your teachers so that your teachers can lead your students coming from a mindset of empathy. And what we know right now more than anything is we're seeing a greater recognition in our country right now around access, around poverty, around access to not only resources, access to the internet, access to two-family, single-family households. Like we're seeing such a divide in the country that's being magnified. And if we don't have an approach of trying to put ourselves in the shoes of students and the shoes of our teachers, but inviting our teachers to also understand what it's like to be a challenged administrator, it might backfire on us right now. So I want to get into how do you do this? Like, how do you create empathy? How do you create humility? The first thing, this is just my opinion, right? Everyone has their own approach to this. You don't do this in large meetings. If you're a staff, when you pull 35, 50, 100 teachers together on a Zoom, your staff meetings should be short and should be quick, where you deliver information and you go over norms. You don't want to have a 90-minute staff meeting with 75 people on a call. So where you're trying to create staff meetings, make them short, sweet, and quick. And if you need to record them for teachers, record them and send them out. There's a reason why you're doing that. The reason why you're doing that is trying to create more time for yourself to do the next strategy. And the next strategy is you need to have a lot of one-on-one or small group sessions where all you do is listen as the administrator. Strictly listen. Like you're not having one-on-one check-ins with teachers so you can tell them what to do. You want to have small group or one-on-one check-ins with your teachers. These are 15-minute check-ins. And a way that you norm this is maybe you ask all teachers the same 2 or 3 questions, but then you leave room for personalizing that conversation. Depends on the size of your staff, right? But you want to make your large staff meetings short, sweet, informational, and about the norms so that you can create a system where you dig into small one-on-one or small group check-ins with your teachers. Those are 2 of the big rocks. There's a third rock that's super critical around empathy and humility. And it's the principal's role to either A, model it, or identify someone on your staff that can model it. You don't have to be the person that has this expertise. But if you don't, you have to find someone on your staff that does. During those large group staff meetings, when you're trying to make them short and sweet, you always want to model an instructional strategy for teachers. If you're an administrator and you are simply talking at your teachers for an hour or 45 minutes and you're never modeling, your teachers will start teaching like you teach to them. And we know young people, even in a virtual space, don't learn like that. So we're going to do that on the call right now because we're at a place where we need to honor the voice of people that are on this call. So in your chat box, here's what I'd like to ask you to contribute right now. One thing that is really resonating with you right now around either extending trust or building empathy and humility. So one thing that's resonating with you around extending trust or these dual concepts of empathy and humility. Type 1 reflection in the chat box. Take 30 seconds and let's quietly do that. See you, Anna. See that, Mr. French, that reflection on micromanaging.
Yeah, and Chris, I think that a lot of these things that we're talking about now, it's giving us a chance to reset ourselves and then set the norm to say, wait a minute, this is not what we should be doing anyway, right?
Appreciate that reflection, David Grace, about rebuilding trust with some staff where it's broken. That's a noble reflection.
Mm.
Shared leadership, Mike, I see that. Laura, always model what you want your teachers to do. One-to-one check-ins, Jake. Letting teachers use their strengths. Jane, you know, that's language we haven't used on this call. And I just want to honor that contribution, because in any space, traditional or the virtual, like, we need to maintain an asset-based way of thinking about the work. So really appreciate that reflection, Jane.
Kellyanne, when I tell teachers, when I say your principals don't know what they're doing either, it's like a big moment for them. And I think that they are like, I saw so many nods and appreciated kind of responses. And so don't be afraid to say that. I don't know what the heck I'm doing either, you guys. So what a chance to break those barriers.
Yeah. What a super, super high level round of reflection. Appreciate, we got people on this call, right, from Connecticut to New Mexico to Vancouver. It's school leaders, school coaches, school administrators that don't have to be here, that are coming together to create the right type of framework for how to think about that. So kudos to you guys. I'm going to ask you to give yourselves a round of snaps with me on the call. I'm in Poetry House snaps. I see you. Let's transition into topics 3 and 4, which will create the back half or the second half of tonight's chat. And Carrie, as we transition, we can copy these reflections and then we can email all of the participants so you guys are able to further reflect on them at your own speed. Great.
Yep, great.
So every school district is in a different space. But when you're leading a staff virtually, thinking creatively becomes a critical concept. We're not talking about growth mindset. That's a driver of thinking creatively. But thinking creatively is super, super key right now. It's an opportunity for you to model yourself as an innovator amongst your staff. And if you're not an innovator or a creator, it's an opportunity for you to model for your staff, you think this is important, and surround yourself with the right people to engage in that conversation. So here's what's happening. Teaching and learning is rapidly evolving in the last 3 to 4 weeks right in front of us. Like, it is rapidly changing in front of us. Somebody put in the chat room that teachers are collaborating more now than they ever have, and it couldn't be more true for my teachers, right? But this concept of teaching and learning is evolving right in front of us, and it's beautiful. There's also this other reality. What do we do about kids that don't check in? What do we do about young people that are absent from the virtual world? What do we do about young people and their families that can't participate because they don't have the resources or the devices or the household environment to engage in that space, right? So we got these two really polar opposites that are happening. Teaching and learning is evolving, and then we're seeing a greater divide in our country and our local communities and our schoolhouses more than we ever have from before. So here's the first thing that I believe is a great practice. We have to carve out time to talk with our teachers about how teaching and learning is evolving. Letting your teachers collaborate is different than you facilitating small groups or PLCs or staff meetings where your teachers come together for a space to talk about how their craft is evolving. They might be collaborating right now around lessons and units and approaches, but you're going to need to carve out time so that you can hear their voice in that space. By default, we have to remember this. Most teachers have a creative side where they want to contribute. They want to make the industry a better space. They want to give back to other teachers. Like, that's why you guys are on here tonight, right? Like, we're just other educators around the country trying to give back. it's the default behavior of teachers. Like, we're servant leaders. That's what we do as educators. We want to give back. So thinking creatively is, first of all, about creating that space for your staff to talk about how the craft is evolving. Second big thing that I've been learning the last 3 weeks in my particular role in our district, we've had to think about how to repurpose the traditional roles of certain staff members. So teachers are teachers. I'm not messing with that domain, right? Teachers are teachers, and I'm not touching that. When I say teachers, I mean the traditional classroom teacher. Our counselors, our secretaries, security monitors, right? We have a building sub in one of our campuses that's a full-time employee. We're fortunate to have that at one of our campuses. We've kept that gentleman employed, and there's a team of people that we are pulling together to think about and how to go help support the identification of students and their lack of participation, their lack of attendance, their lack of ability to participate in the space. Because teachers are struggling, like, how do they teach their current 100 students and simultaneously go track down, how do they go track down the other 20 students, right? So whether it be phone calls, whether it be emails, whether it be sorting through data, make sure that you are asking your non-teaching staff what their assets are, and really thinking creatively about how to repurpose what their identities are. Because when given an opportunity, I will tell you that they will rise to the occasion. You just have to give them the opportunity to rise to that space. The other thing that I would encourage us to think about, so first I said we want to make space to talk about how the art of teaching and learning is creating and evolving. Then we want to think creatively about how to repurpose our staff members for the purpose of supporting students so that teachers can focus on teaching and learning. Thirdly, as I would say, situational leadership is really key right now. Not every teacher has the capacity yet to talk about how teaching and learning is evolving. Not everybody can focus on that. Some of our teachers are just in Maslow's hierarchy, like they're in the bottom 2 tiers. They're trying to just manage their own families, their own children, and get through the necessities of delivering instruction. So don't force that on your staff when you're trying to think creatively. Figure out who your high flyers are and invite them into the spaces where they want to be able to feel free to contribute, and they have the capacity. Not everyone can do that. And then finally is make sure that you pull your staff together to honor the way that they are growing as teachers. Like, thinking creatively is going to fuel itself if you're honoring where you see creativity happening in your staff. You can't just expect it to happen. And I don't mean like shout it out, like I want to shout out Tara for being creative. Create some spaces where teachers can unpack at a deep level and really share what they've been doing creatively, because that teachers feel the most honored when they have voice in the space. They don't want someone else to celebrate them. Teachers really want to give back to the service. They want to give back to the craft. So I saw a couple of comments come up in the chat from Frank, from Katie. Katie's done a great job of summarizing some things in the chat that we can copy and paste out of here and push back out to everybody. Thinking creatively is on the left side, and the right side is our final concept tonight, which is building community. So I want to define what this is not. Building staff community on this call is not about reaching your broader community. I'm not talking about social media. I'm not talking about using school messenger to push out information to your families. That's not what I'm talking about. If you think back to extending trust, one of the suggestions we're offering tonight is to have those small group or one-on-one check-ins where the administrator and teacher, or teachers and small groups, build trust. But there has to be some places where you're doing that whole group. So there has to be some opportunities where you start to build what the staff's community or the staff's identity is. And we're going to talk about this as a group for a second. So here's the first thing when it comes to thinking about building staff community is make sure you have a rotational plan. Some of your teachers need consistency right now. And sometimes you need some things that aren't planned. A lot of great schools around the country are doing Genius Hour. They're doing free chats. They're doing coffee chats. And then other times they're doing some defined staff meetings. Make sure that you have a balance of defined places where teachers need to be, and then some opportunities that are free choice spaces so that you're personalizing for teachers. That's going to create a foundation upon which how you build the right type of staff community. The other thing that we really want to talk about is the size of your staff and the culture of your school matters. So you're going to need to come up with your own set of defined small moves that you can repetitiously do to build community for your teachers. One particular example, some schools I see are doing this and some schools are not. So I'd love to see from you all on this call who's doing this and who's not. When I was a principal, I never thought about it like this until it became a virtual space. I had staff meetings in the cafeteria, the media center. And then once a month or once a quarter, I'd have student assemblies while my teachers were teaching. Well, guess what's happening in a virtual space? Teachers and students can actually come together collaboratively in virtual spaces to talk about whatever their needs are, their appreciations are, the things that they are honoring are, and even letting students have voice into the culture of what they're learning virtually will influence how the community is developed amongst your staff. One of the principals that I supervised during week 1, she sent me a text and said, "Get on my community chat." And I said, "What's your community chat?" She said, "All of my student body is coming to my staff meeting." I said, "What are you talking about?" She was like, "As many of my students that want to come to the staff meeting today are going to come to the staff meeting and they're going to participate in the agenda." Blew my mind how I've been in education for 19, 20 years and we've never done this before. It was different than like a student assembly. That's not what it was about. Young people were actually being invited into the space to talk about teaching and learning with teachers. And it totally had an impact on the staff's community afterwards because they were able to unpack student voice at a really deep and authentic level. So what we wanted to do is recognize that you have to, when you're leading your staff, there has to be this approach of how you think creatively. But then you have to figure out how you're going to build staff community. And on this call, there are things, let me see if I can unpack this the right way. You can send out things like bring a pet to staff meeting day and everybody brings their pet, right? You can do staff t-shirt days and hat days. I know that you all on this call, you can get on Twitter and find out 100 of those things right now. You can get on the internet and just Google best ideas for virtual staff meetings, and there's 150 things that exist. This is more about how do you get your staff to embrace a newfound identity where they're reflecting on what their identity is as a staff now. That's what this slide is about. Building staff community is meant to take on a deeper approach. It's not meant to be, we know that you all have the current capacity to lead staff around doing fun things, but how will your staff's mindsets change and putting them in a space where they can share that community? So trying to force that into a staff meeting when you only have 5 minutes is probably going to backfire. You need some, just once every 2 weeks, some opportunistic time where you carve out for teachers to really coach your administrators back on how the staff's culture is developing, asking very scripted questions and not being afraid to take risks like putting students in the same spaces with teachers to talk about the culture of virtual teaching and learning. So just like we did before, I want to open the chat room up and ask you to think or contribute. What's one thing that's resonating with you around thinking creatively, or what's one thing that's resonating as it relates to building staff community? That's Kellyanne, I'll answer your question in a minute. I see it.
Oh, virtual staff happy hour. That's nice.
Mm. It's deep, Andrea or Andrea. Not sure which way, but I see you. It's a great reflection, Mike. Yes, Tara, on the PBL thing. That's heavy right now. Appreciate you seeing and hearing the student voice, Robin Murphy. Agree. I'm not sure the first name, Mr. or Mrs. French. I didn't catch who you are, but yes, a lot of our parents are doing some home teaching right now, including my wife in the other room. She's teaching 4th grade and 8th grade right now. Katie, I'm going to have you type a couple concepts in the chat box, because I think the contributions that people are making in the chat room right now are so powerful. I'm going to rapidly fire away 20 things so that people can see them.
This is so William. 20 is so many. I was like, I thought you were going to say 3, but go ahead.
Yeah. So here's the first one: scavenger hunts. Second one: door decoration contests. Third one: chalk
background contests.
Chalk challenges. Bring a family member to Zoom. A staff quarantine playlist. Spirit days. Stems to solicit voice. Kelly Ann, those are those pre-scripted ones. Carrie will walk you through an example of 1 or 2 stems in about 2 minutes. 5-minute storytelling. Showcasing art. Number 10 is my favorite. Reenacting a news segment with staff members or modeling an ESPN segment is absolutely hilarious to do with certain teachers. Breakout rooms. If you don't have the paid version of Zoom, you should, I'd pay for it. I mean, if I'm a teacher and your school won't pay for it out of your own pocket for 1 month for $12 if you can afford it. It's the greatest feature you can get for 1 month of virtual learning. We've done live DJing, virtual dance parties. Offer your teachers the opportunity for a book club right now. Virtual show and tell with students and teachers together. So I'm going to stop there because I think some people that came to tonight's call, they also wanted very specific things that you could take and deliver right away. And there's a list of 15, right? What's important though is, let me see if I can get this across clearly. Your staff will head nod you. A head nod is when they're calling your bluff without using those words. You can do all the fun things you want in the world. If you're not committed to extending professional trust to your teachers and not micromanaging right now, they don't care what type of games you're trying to throw at them on a Thursday staff meeting at 2:00. They just don't care. Like, we know what teacher culture is. If you've been a teacher, we've all been there, right? So we have to model empathy and humility. We have to not only try to think creatively. If you're not a creator, then you surround yourself with teachers that are. And don't be afraid to engage in that work. Remember, building community can be the 15 fun things that I just listed, but you have to carve out time to talk about how is the culture of our staff's community changing? What is our staff's identity now? Your staff had an identity in August when you started the school year. You had an identity. If you were going to list 5 or 10 words that described your staff in August, what would they be? And what are those 5 words now? Because I see school districts describing themselves as more collaborative, more resolute, more committed, more empathetic than they were back in August. And it doesn't mean it was a bad thing in August, right? But anytime your staff has an identity, people become committed to the culture at a deeper level, a more intimate level. Persistence is right, Tara. So Katie and Carrie had the call scheduled until 7:30, Carrie?
Yep.
Before we get into sentence stems, I think I'd like to try taking certain people's microphones off of mute. And I'd love to hear from 5 people, just a quick 20-second reflection of the number one thing you're taking away from tonight's call. Just what's your number one thing you're leaving with? And we'll try not to walk on each other, right? So somebody take a gamble, fire away, and introduce yourself and share for 20 seconds one thing you're leaving with tonight.
Hi, this is Andrea from Rhode Island. Would you like me to go?
Fire away, Andrea. Thanks for being number one out of the gates. People from Rhode Island are always first. Go ahead.
So I'm an assistant principal at a high school, and what is really encouraging and affirming for me are some of the strategies that you shared. We just weren't sure how to use some of our time as productively as possible, so we had started scheduling 5 to 10 minute check-ins with our faculty, not only with our teachers, but also our teaching assistants and our support professionals. And that time has been so valuable. And at first, we wanted to start with them sharing strategies, and then it turned into a time just to listen and kind of connect with them at a social emotional level. So hearing you say that using that time is valuable just kind of affirms that we're heading in the right direction. And we, over a week-long period of last week, met with 98 different providers from our building, myself and the principal, through a simple Google Meet, and we used the same link. And once one person was done, the next person popped on, and it was just, I think, pretty effective. And I think this affirms that we want to continue that practice. So that's a big takeaway for me.
Appreciate the share out, Andrea, and shout outs to all my peoples in Rhode Island right now. Someone else want to go? Let's go for number 2. Where my risk takers at? Go ahead. Edith, fire away.
Yeah, I work in Hillsborough County in Tampa, Florida. I'm an elementary principal. And once again, I also feel that like you're reaffirming a lot of things that I'm putting in place and feeling that, kind of going, not knowing what to do, just taking some of the leadership training that I've had and like trying to apply it to this virtual world. But that professional trust is big. And you know what? They're rising to the occasion. They really are. They're working so hard because they feel supported. They feel like they're trusted. And just that reassuring of them that you've got their back, and even if they make mistakes, you're going to be there. And
that's right.
But that one-on-one time, I went from having like K2 meetings and 3-5 meetings, and it just didn't feel right. I really didn't feel like I was hearing their voice. This week, I've gone to having more specific grade level meetings. And honestly, we spend time talking about teaching and learning, but we also spend time talking about like the struggles that they're having, and being such a staff that expects and how to deal with like the students that aren't rising to the occasion, and what are some strategies to, impact them and what we can do.
Appreciate the reflection, Edith. And if I heard one thing is for you is you're honoring student voice and to trust your gut because you're doing the right work. So it's a dope reflection. Number 3, third person want to share out.
I'll go. I'm Mary Ann. I'm also from Hillsborough County. So our team at our school is very competitive. And so they love doing all the door decorating. And when we do things like for a week where we have like twin day and things like that, I mean, they just go all out. So we'd already been talking about what we were going to do for Teacher Appreciation Week and things like that. So looking at these things like the scavenger hunt and things like that, I'm really excited to start doing that as well, with maybe like once a week we could do something like that. Because I was starting to do things like, are you smarter than a fifth grader on my weekly bulletin? And they were real quick to answer that because they wanted that front parking spot. So they were really competitive about that. And so they actually asked me in faculty meeting yesterday, so how do I get the front parking spot now? I'm like, it is free, you can have it. So we're real excited about that. So I can't wait to share this with my cohorts and my admin staff to say, hey, let's get some of these things rolling just to get them back and realize that we're just people and we want to do these fun things again.
Great reflection. What we're going to do is I'm going to pivot to Carrie, let her give some one or two examples of stems, because that was a question that I think Kelly Ann from Vancouver asked. And then after Carrie offers those stems, we can close out a couple minutes early. And in modeling how we should always end meetings, it's always about releasing your people early, right? So plan for an hour, release it 50 minutes. They appreciate it.
One thing that I want to share before we kind of go over just a couple ideas for stems is William. And William always has a way of making you feel seen and heard. And I think he models that just even in a virtual space. So I'd love for you just to think about, and if you go back and rewatch the video, what are the things that he did in the virtual space that made people feel seen and heard? And they're just little tiny comments that he makes. I think a lot of times we'll like read something in a chat and we see it, we hear it, we resonate with it, but we don't verbalize it. And he verbalizes. Spend some time with William. He verbalizes everything. But it's so powerful for him to, when he's with people, because he really does make them feel seen and heard. And so if you felt that today, it's a really great opportunity. It was a really great chance for him to model what you can do in a virtual space with your own staff, because he tries to notice as much as he can out loud. So not just that person can hear it, but everybody can. So just kind of take that with you. So one of the things that we were chatting about before was around some stems in terms of community. Now, we know community building within your staff. We know that when we just sort of lay it out there, now you guys were really great when we say, give us some takeaways and some reflections. But that doesn't always happen, right? Like you leave an open-ended question out there and it just sort of, you'll see what people get at top of mind. And just like we do with students, we do this with adults as well. Some sort of a stem that gets them focused into an area. And so if we're thinking about community and we're thinking about trying to tap into where they are, there's some really simple things, simple stems that you can start with. Katie, you could write these down. But as I'm saying them, other ideas are going to come into your head. So what I'd like for you to do is also write what you're thinking as some stems. These are not like, it's not brain surgery here to do this, but it's just getting kind of a brain dump of ideas. So as I'm saying some and Katie writes some, just write some, write down what you might be thinking too. So I think this stem of like, I'm finding it hard too, and allowing people to be able to have the opportunity to say, this is hard for me. And it can be any aspect of their life. I just want to vent about, allow them that chance.
Carrie,
I felt
I'm going to add one.
What?
Sorry, I thought you were pausing. Kelly Ann, I want to add one that I stole from High Tech High that we've been using with our teachers, and it's so daggone powerful right now. And it's a 3-part stem, and it reads like this. I used to think, now I think, I promise to.
Yep.
When you ask your teachers right now, after 4 weeks of virtual learning, I used to think, now I think, I promise to, it changes the room.
Another piece was what I've learned blank, I will apply by when I'm back in class, when I'm back in my regular classroom. I can't wait for blank. And that could be like when I'm back in my classroom. Some simple appreciation stems I think are going to be important too. So I appreciated when, I felt seen when, super simple, but just be, you know, and I'd like to give teachers a couple of stems to be thinking about and then have them comment. You'll get so much more participation when you give them something just very clear for them to go with and open-ended. Doesn't matter, Anna, really, but it really the opportunity that you have to build community and you can use them. Yeah, Edith, that's true. It does. It does get rid of the crickets. If you can think of any, add some in there because we can just build upon that. So we're going to let you guys go early. There's just kind of a quote that I saw that I thought this is really powerful for what you're going through now and what you want to be as a leader. Innovation determines the difference between a leader and a follower. And this is a chance for you guys to truly be innovators here. What you are doing, you guys could be writing articles for years. So think about what are you going to do that you're going to be able to share and use. It's those lemons. And I keep saying, what kind of lemonade are you going to make at the end of this? Right? And all of you are going to have different recipes. And the more innovative you can be, and I don't let you have as many stressors as everybody else, right? So don't let yourself get all worked up where you can't do your job. But this is good. This is going to force you to be innovative. And so don't lose sight of what you're doing as innovation. Go ahead, William.
Before we sign off, I was just going to tell the group, I'm going to go fire up my grill and get an adult beverage and a cigar on my back porch. I'm just letting you guys know.
Oh my gosh. That's his last word of wisdom for you.
Yeah.
Let me just share a couple of follow-up things that we're excited to offer. So Classroom U has a Facebook group that we have all sorts of educators on. It's a great way to stay in touch with us. I do lots of trainings, lots for teachers that you guys can invite your teachers to, but you can be a part of. And I do a lot of mindset work, and that's important to me, and around strategies that really truly help the idea of 100% of the time. We have an Instagram page too, but one piece of follow-up that we want to do with you all, with leaders, is we'd like to offer a chance, if you're interested, to follow back up with you all in a week. A week from today, same time, same place, to be able to say, hey, how are you doing? And make it more of an open discussion. Not a PowerPoint, not a training, but to be able to just hear what you're doing, get feedback on it. You can talk to each other. We can do some small group stuff and just give you a community to be able to share beyond the team that you work with, every day, right? Getting perspective from all over this country is a really powerful tool. And if we have the ability to help make that happen for you, we want to. So there is a link in there that you can click into. We'll also send you the link too. And if we have enough people that are willing and wanting to do it, we'll run that next week. So we hope to see a lot of you back to be able to do that. And that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing our screen. Katie puts the link to our Facebook group and to our Instagram in the chat. And we're just psyched that you guys were able to come. Any other comments or thoughts, you can unmute as well, or you're free to leave. We'll stay on for a couple of minutes too. Thanks, guys. William, that's your favorite sentence stem for everything.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
My Jay-Z chat. I got 99 problems and blank ain't one. Just let the teachers fill it in. The Jay-Z stem.
Waiting until the end.
I hear Karen Smith. That was definitely a Karen Smith voice.
It's Karen Smith.
Bye, Mr. Frank. Your dad's checking out, Carrie. He's got
Bye,
to
Dad.
go.
Thanks.
Bye, William.
Thanks again, guys. That was awesome.
Awesome.
Yay.
Thank you, guys.
So glad.
Bye, Tara. Bye, Edith. Bye, Laura.
I like David's background.
So
Got his whole bulletin board back there. It's awesome.
Peace, David.
Oh, good, Laura. I'm glad. That's awesome.
Bye, Laura.
look at Karen Smith.